I'm Harley Mason. I'm 22 years old, and my sophomore year of college, I quit the sport I fell in love with at 4 years old. This is my story. I started playing softball when I was 4 years old, whenever my parents put me into t-ball. For most of what I can remember, I just fell in love with it. I loved just the competitive nature of it, and as I got older, I just fell in love with improving my skills and just being around my teammates. My journey with mental health started as early as 6th grade. Ever since then, I just remember always having this weird fog over me, what I would later find out was depression. In 2019, I was officially diagnosed with major depressive disorder. Since then, I've also dealt with a lot of anxiety and other mental health conditions that have made living quite a battle at times. And while it's been really hard to deal with my mental health struggles, it's also made me a lot more empathetic towards people. It's really deepened my relationships. It's opened my eyes to those around me and allowed me to help people in a way that I want to change for the world. And ultimately, it's really deepened my relationship with God. Okay. Period. At first, I think softball really helped my mental health because it was like my escape, and it was my escape until it wasn't. As I got older, especially into high school, it became just a lot of pressure to perform and to have the stats and to make the big plays and to just be everything that my teammates, parents, coaches, family wanted me to be as a player. And after a while, I kind of lost sight of what I wanted and who I was. But ultimately, the pressure of the game is what led me to give it up. I feel like when I was younger, I played pretty freely and pretty not held back by the fear of failure. Softball is a game of failure, and we're told that as we get older. And then whenever you're not performing well, the anxiety just takes over. There's just so much expectation around how your teammates feel about you, how do your coaches feel about you? Am I making my parents proud? Am I making my family proud? Am I doing what I'm being paid to do as an athlete? Am I disappointing everyone? And it starts to really impact your game, especially mentally, because you're just so in your head about what can I do to live up to all these expectations, and how can I not fail even though softball is a game of failure. I just remember being up at the plate during a softball game, and just instead of being able to focus on the pitcher and what's going on, I'm more worried about what are people's reactions going to be if I strike out. And then that carries into once you leave the field, you're not done dealing with the anxiety of it. You go home with it. You're constantly thinking about how you can improve your game. You're thinking about that error I made in the game, what are people thinking about that? You're thinking about I'm probably not going to get recruited by this coach now. You're thinking, how can I continue to be a successful athlete and keep up with everything else that I have to keep up with? One of my first practices of my second year at my junior college, our coach had a huddle with us to talk about recruiting and the recruiting process, where we going to go after, and just talking about how we really needed to get ourselves ready to perform well for our sophomore year if we wanted a chance of being recruited. And I remember I actually walked off the field during that huddle and had one of my very first panic attacks, just because I couldn't handle the pressure of am I gonna do good enough? Am I performing well enough? Am I good enough for this? Am I physically capable enough? Am I in the right shape? Am I in the right mindset? I just remember all of those questions flooding my mind, and I actually had to leave the field and had one of my very first panic attacks. Over the last year of not playing softball, I've definitely gotten the chance to engage in many different things that have brought me a lot of joy. Specifically leading worship, that's something that I've been able to pour a lot more into, and leading worship has brought out just a much bigger purpose that I believe God has for my life, and has taught me a lot about his character and just the art of worship, and really how central that should be in our lives as Christians. I found a lot of joy in just forming new friendships and meeting new people outside of athletic communities that I probably wouldn't have met otherwise. You're so much more than your sport. And while it seems scary to maybe step away from it, just please know that God has so much more for you to offer to the world than your talents and abilities on the court or on the field. You're not defined by it. While it's terrifying to think of giving it up or just knowing that your time in your sport is ending, God has a much bigger purpose for you outside of the sport that you play. And you're struggling with wanting to know if you should continue with your sport, ultimately you have to do what's best for you and your health, because at the end of the day, you're the only one that understands the weight of the game.